Israel-Palestine conflict is one of the world's most controversial and longest-running conflicts. In essence, it's a conflict between two self-determination movements, the Jewish Zionist project and the Palestinian nationalist project, that lay claim to the same territory. If you ask people about initiation of this conflict, some will start with 19th century Jewish migration to the Ottoman Empire to escape the persecutions in Eastern Europe and the rise of Zionism, while some will begin with Balfour Declaration by the British government in 1917 in support of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. Yet, many people will start with the UN's vote in 1947 to partition land in the British Mandate of Palestine into two states, one Jewish and one Arab, following the destruction of European Jewry in the Holocaust. The modern state of Israel was proclaimed by David Ben-Gurion on May 14, 1948. Palestinians lamented Israel's creation as nakba, meaning catastrophe, as it resulted in their dispossession and blocked their dreams of statehood. After Proclamation, Egypt, Transjordan, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon invaded territory in the former Palestinian Mandate. These five nations occupied the areas in southern and eastern Palestine, not apportioned to the Jews by the UN partition of Palestine, and then captured East Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the Israelis won control of road to Jerusalem through the Yehuda Mountains and repulsed Arab attacks. By early 1949, Israel managed to occupy Negev Desert, but not Gaza. Around 700,000 Palestinians fled or expelled from their homes in the area that became Israel. Armistice pacts halted the fighting in 1949, but there was no formal peace. Tensions mounted again when, in 1956, Egyptian President Gamal Nasser nationalized Suez Canal, a waterway that connects Europe and Asia. It was largely owned by French and British. France and Britain struck a deal with Israel, whose ships were barred from using the canal and whose southern port of Eilat had been blockaded by Egypt, wherein Israel would invade Egypt. France and Britain would then intervene, ostensibly as peacemakers, and take control of the canal. In October 1956, Israel invaded Gaza Strip and Egyptian Sinai, followed by France and Britain, with the aim of regaining control of Suez Canal. The invasion received international condemnation. Under intense pressure, particularly from the US, troops were withdrawn and replaced by UN force. Britain's declining status was highlighted, and its PM Anthony Eden resigned. Egypt was granted ownership and sovereignty of the Suez Canal. In 1964, an alliance of Palestinian groups founded PLO under the leadership of Yasser Arafat, the founder of Fatah Party, to establish Arab state in place of Israel. In 1967, Israel launched six-day war against Egypt and Syria and occupied West Bank, Jerusalem, Gaza Strip, Sinai Peninsula, and Golan Heights. Hamas was founded by Sheikh Ahmed Yassin in 1987 after the start of First Intifada, an uprising against Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories. Hamas started as an offshoot of Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and created a military wing to pursue armed struggle against Israel. Hamas doesn't recognize Israel's statehood, but accepts a Palestinian state on 1967 borders. In 1993, Oslo peace process started with talks between Israel and PLO. Israel's then PM, Yitzhak Rabin, signed an agreement with Yasser Arafat aimed at fulfilling the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. However, he didn't accept the principle of a Palestinian state. Oslo Accords established the Palestinian National Authority, granting limited self-governance over patches of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Further negotiations were intended to resolve issues like the status of Jerusalem, future of the Israeli settlements, and the right of return for millions of Palestinians still classified as refugees after their forebears were never permitted to return to their homes. Some Palestinians regarded the accords as surrender, while right-wing Israelis opposed giving up settlements. In Camp David summit of 2000, President Clinton, Israeli PM Ehud Barak, and Yasser Arafat failed to reach a final peace deal, which contributed to the outbreak of Second Intifada. It was ended in 2005 with 3,000 Palestinians and 1,000 Israelis dead. Second Intifada led to construction of the West Bank barrier. Israel's then PM Ariel Sharon said that Israel couldn't go on occupying the Palestinians' territory, but he didn't say that the alternative was an independent Palestinian state. Another consequence of Second Intifada was Sharon's decision to disengage from the Palestinians with the closing of Israeli settlements in Gaza and parts of northern West Bank. The status of Gaza since disengagement is disputed. Israel says it's no longer occupied, but the UN says otherwise because of Israel's continued control of airspace, territorial waters, and access into the territory along with Egypt. Palestinians in Gaza don't see themselves as a separate entity from rest of their territories in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and consider themselves occupied. In 2006, Hamas won elections. Israel began arresting Hamas members of the Palestinian parliament and imposed sanctions against Gaza. The relations between Hamas and Fatah party deteriorated. Agreement to form a national unity government fell apart, and Hamas led an armed takeover of Gaza, while Fatah continued to control Palestinian authority in the West Bank. Israel continued to maintain blockade of Gaza, which worsened living conditions. Peace efforts have been stalled since 2014, when talks failed between Israelis and Palestinians in Washington. The most serious escalations in Israeli-Palestinian conflict began on October 7, 2023, when Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel, with 5,000 rockets fired within 20-minute window, exceeding the capacity of Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system. Hamas called it Operation Al-Aqsa Flood. The attack was like Blitzkrieg, meaning a quick, violent, and intimidating attack. Blitzkrieg refers specifically to the German military offensive during World War II. The attacks inflicted a major blow to Mossad's credibility, the second largest espionage agency after CIA. Israel laid siege to Hamas-ruled Gaza following the October 7th cross-border assault that killed 1,400 Israelis. Gaza death toll passed 10,000 in air and artillery strikes by Israel in initial few weeks. Israel said that it launched ground incursion inside the Gaza Strip to attack Hamas and rescue hostages. This conflict has thrown a spotlight on Israel's 16-year blockade of Gaza Strip and its policy of settlement expansion in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. We all have been profoundly shaken by massive destruction and desperate situation in Gaza. Millions of lives are at stake. War is not the answer to anything. Sanity has to prevail.